Welcome to the United Nations News by Universal Versatile Society, casting a bright light on the latest development from United Nations. This is Shruti Chopra. Making the headlines. UN rights expert slams Amazon, DoorDash, and Walmart for trapping employees in poverty. COP28 to address economies that heavily rely on fossil fuels. Quality education key to global challenge. Women avocation for urgent action to address the issues faced by women in conflict zones. UN urges global cooperation for sustainable urban development. Helsinki Commission reports degradation of the Baltic Sea. Gaza in medical crisis UN AIDS. Now, news in details. Rights expert slams Amazon, DoorDash, and Walmart for trapping employees in poverty. A union poverty expert has urged the CEOs of Amazon, DoorDash, and Walmart to address allegations that their low wages are pushing workers into poverty and dependence on U.S. government assistance. The independent expert highlighted inadequate pay, aggressive union busing tactics, and the misclarification of workers as quote-unquote independent contractors, depriving them of traditional employment benefits. He called on these multi-million-dollar companies to set the standard for fair wages and working conditions, emphasizing that jobs should lead workers out of poverty, not force them to rely on government support. The U.S. is lagging in terms of worker protection and wage policies, with millions classified as quote-unquote working poor. COP28 to address economies that heavily rely on fossil fuels. The COP28 Climate Summit is set to take place next month with the goal of achieving a collective agreement between all parties to triple renewable energy capacity by 2023 and focus on tackling all potential obstacles that could delay its implementation. Some parties raised concerns about increasing capacity not being enough without the active reduction of CO2 emissions, which will accelerate the rising global temperatures past a 1.5 degrees Celsius limit. The delay in reaching its agreement comes from economies such as Russia and Saudi Arabia, who navigate economies that heavily rely on fossil fuels. Quality education key to global challenge. According to a study done by University World News, any government that hopes to function effectively must deal with a number of intricate problems related to themes like digitalization, sustainability, green, circular growth, climate change, and renewable energy. The search for optimal solutions to these problems is aggravated by the lack of people qualified to resolve them. Hence, there is a need for a fundamental review and reform of existing education and training systems. Nevertheless, it is believed that initiatives could assist in accelerating quality teaching around the world. UN women avocations for urgent action to address the issues faced by women in conflict zones. The executive director of UN Women, Phumzile Mlambo Ngcuka, addressed the UN Security Council on the urgent need for transformative action to achieve women's peace and security. She emphasized that gender inequality is a root cause of conflict and that women's participation in peace processes is crucial. Mlambo Ngcuka also highlighted the disproportionate impact of conflict on women and girls, including sexual violence and misplacement. She called for increased funding for women's organizations and gender-responsive humanitarian aid. This speech was made during an open debate on women, peace, and security. UN urges global cooperation for sustainable urban development. UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres marked World Cities Day by highlighting the pivotal role cities play in global sustainable development. He stressed that cities are not only engines of economic growth and innovation, but are also facing complex challenges, including climate change, inequality, and political polarization. Over half of the world's population already lives in urban areas, and this is projected to rise to 70% by 2050. Guterres called for collective action, emphasizing the need for equitable financing solutions to create resilient, sustainable cities and ensure no one is left behind in the urban future. Helsinki Commission reports degradation of the Baltic Sea. According to the Helsinki Commission report for the protection of the marine environment of the Baltic Sea, HELCOM, the ecosystem of the Baltic Sea is degrading due to loss of biodiversity and pollution. Between 2016 and 2021, overfishing, pollution, and the accumulation of nutrients from wastewater or heavily fertilized agricultural land have been the greatest threats, exacerbated by climate change. Nevertheless, marine pollution has been reduced due to regional agreements, although only in a few regions. Nonetheless, according to German researchers involved in the Helcom report, many animal species are exposed to the adverse effects of climate change and pollution. Gaza in medical crisis, UN AIDS. Amid the escalating global crisis in Gaza, the UN has facilitated medical evacuations from the beleaguered territory. UN Health Agency Chief Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus commended Egypt's decision to accept critically ill patients from Gaza for treatment, marking a positive step. Nevertheless, there are still overwhelming needs, with patients requiring sustainable access to healthcare and medical supplies. Inadequate aid and overcrowded shelters underscore the urgency. The crisis also affects journalists, with concerns raised about their safety. The international community must take swift action to mitigate the dire situation in Gaza and prevent further escalation. This was Shruti Chopra. Thank you for listening. See you next time.